Welcome to the Steam Launch Report here at SIEGE 2019. My name is Mike Stumhofer. I'm a game developer here. I founded a company called Hoff Studios, made a game called Depth of Extinction, and I'm also publishing a game called Polyroll. That's my Twitter handle. I'm also joined by Robert Wahler, who is the award-winning developer of Sinkr and Sinkr 2 on Steam, mobile, pretty much everywhere you want to buy those games. They will also be on the console platforms here soon. That's his Twitter. I've also got Jason Hillhouse of Blue Bomber. Probably heard of Looking for Healz. They've won a bunch of awards also. He also made another virtual reality game called Arbiter. And Looking for Healz is their Twitter there. We've got Stu Phelps, the other half of Blue Bomber. Also the whole of Neon the Ninja, basically. Both excellent games if you want to pick them up. Nega Stu on Twitter. And we've got Kevin Dressel, Shiny Dolphin Games. He is the developer behind Clash Force and Zap Blastum. You can play Zap Blastum out there. And Clash Force, actually, too. And he's Shiny Dolphins on Twitter. So I'm going to hand it off to Jason. We're going to talk about the elephant in the room here.
Yeah. We have a preface before going into Steam, because lately, or I guess last month, September 12th, Steam released an algorithm update which kind of changed things up a decent amount. In a nutshell, if you had a game that was in pre-development that hadn't been released yet, it will no longer show up on the More Like This at the bottom of popular games that you've tagged similar to your own. And that is the main change, and as well as in that same section of More Like This, popular games are the only ones that will show up there. So if you have maybe 10, 20, 40 reviews, probably not going to show up anywhere but this discovery queue, which is another new feature that they added. So that's the big change that happened. We can go into that here. Yeah, we had some sales and wishlist drops. These are two games in development that were looking pretty promising that had a giant wishlist problem after the 12th update. Mainly the big takeaway is that, yeah, you can probably go to the next one. Yeah, the downturn was after the 12th. And mainly the takeaway is that the previous way of doing things where you could basically get your Steam page up real early, build those wish lists up, get a few thousand people behind you, and then release using a pretty reliable wish list to sales conversion rate, not too viable now. So it's kind of a different strategy in terms of what to do with your Steam game in pre-development.
So yeah, with that in mind, I thought maybe we should talk about what are the other options out there aside from Steam. The first one everybody's heard of, the Epic Games Store. Unfortunately, this is kind of a non-starter at the moment. It's completely curated. Basically, they are coming to you if they want you to be on their platform, and it's generally exclusive deals. We've got GOG, which is another curated platform, but they have a sign-up form, so you can go and give them some information about your game, a few keys, and you can potentially get on their platform. It's a little bit heavily weighted towards like RPGs, fantasy, sci-fi stuff, and obviously classic games, so like pixel art, but not like it's not a family-friendly type of platform.
They didn't want Sinkr, in case you're wondering.
Depth of Extinction's on there, and yeah. Sorry, Robert. So there's a couple little things I put on this slide, like this little icon to the top right of GOG means that they have a command line build interface, so you can actually, as a developer, program this into your build scripts and automatically publish. We've also got the Humble Store. I don't know if everybody is aware that you can actually buy Steam keys on the Humble Store, aside from just the Humble bundles and things like that. So that's another place. It is curated, but again, there's a sign-up form. We also have another Steam key seller that probably the next biggest one is Green Man Gaming. Again, another curated site, but with a sign-up form. We have itch.io, which probably every indie developer should have heard of. They have some amazing tools. Everything's free. There's no real sign-up form at all. You basically just go post your game. You can sell Steam keys on there, but it's mostly free games. You can get some buyers, generally if you get featured, and they curate the featured spots, so that helps. We've got Gamejolt. I don't know if everybody's heard of that. It's another open storefront, has some featured curation. I don't know how many people are having success with selling games on there, though. It's primarily free stuff. We've got Cartridge, which is another site that wanted to take on Steam. I think, again, same kind of story. You can get on there, put your game up, but if they decide if they'll feature you, I don't know what the buying situation is. If the reviews are any indication, there's not many people buying games on there. Sinkr's on there, right?
Yeah, you can, the same rules of thumb
Use
you
the
use
mic.
on Steam, 50 reviews, right? You can use the same rules on cartridge to determine how many owners you have. So not many. They're trying really hard. They lost their CEO recently, so.
Yeah, and so there are some other options as well, like the Windows App Store, the Mac App Store, Casual Portals. Joe could tell you about that. Congregate, G2A. I don't know how good of an option that is.
Although just to add that if you do think you have a good marketing momentum with your game, Steam is, from the available data, about 90% market share with this PC games. So if you think you have a really good thing going, Steam is still a good option.
Yeah, I mean, my experience was that Steam was maybe not quite 90%, but pretty close. And so I was on GOG, Humble, and Itch. Yeah, 90% of the sales. Yeah. Well, and you have to remember there's a little bit of overlap, like Humble and Green Man are selling Steam keys, so that's makes it a little bit more complicated. But yeah, it's Steam is the dominant force here. I don't know. We don't have numbers about what Epic's market share is at this point. I'm guessing it's pretty significant with all the exclusives they've had. So we'll see. The time will tell where this goes. So now I'm going to hand it over to Robert, who's going to walk us through.
All right, Mike, thanks for that. Yeah, so we showed you a bunch of platforms other than Steam, but Steam, like we said, is still a dominant platform, and it changes so often. What I wanted to do is kind of give you the way I overview Steam. So what I did on Friday, or maybe I guess it was yesterday, I actually went to the homepage of Steam, and what you're looking at now is the Steam new and trending list, and you don't have to do anything as a customer to get to that page. It's on the home page. You see it, and games that are on this page, they're there because they're really doing well at launch. It's also feeds itself like chicken and egg. Once you're there, it feeds into the algorithm, and you get more people to look at your page. You get more wish lists, and you get more sales. So everybody wants to be on this Steam new and trending list. Now, if you click through one more click, you're going to get to what they call the new releases, which is just a different view of that. It's, I think that you can go ahead and click to the next one. This is where it starts to get interesting. If you click twice from the home page, not many people are going to do this, right?
It's in the bottom.
Yeah, it's in the very bottom, but this is what you get to see, and this is what I want to talk about, because this is, to me, the really interesting stuff about Steam. Now, being on this list doesn't mean you're going to make lots of more sales. That was the first screen I showed you. Yeah. Homepage feeds itself, you get more sales. 2 clicks away, not so much. But what it does tell you is what's popular, what's really working. This is by release date, so the top ones are the new ones on the list. Notice that I've circled some of the games. And look what they are. They're free. More than half of the games on this list are free to play or straight up free. As a matter of fact, 4 of them are straight up free. And that, I had no idea. And I've been working on the Steam platform for years. And I didn't realize it. And I should have, because like Dota and Team Fortress 2, if you page down, and we can't hear, but if you page down, you'll see on the second page of new releases is a 2007 game, Team Fortress, right? So we don't know how they're making this algorithm work. We don't know how what actually gets you up there, but there's some things we can guess. Like all of them have a thumb, which means they're mostly positive or very positive or overwhelmingly positive, right? There's no mix, there's no lower than that. So that must figure into the algorithm. I don't know whether they're trying to give free and free to play an equal measure of the charts. That could be. It could just be these are the ones that are getting most of the clicks.
Yeah, I mean, I would say it's, there's no barrier to entry with a free game, right? And free games are probably getting reviewed at the same rate as paid games, so you're seeing a lot of reviews.
Right. Yeah. So Yeah, let's go to the next one. So that got me thinking, and I'm really interested in this angle. But depending on what your goals are on Steam, if you're coming out with your first game, maybe money should be sunk into marketing. And so two of those straight up free games are student games. That's interesting to me. They're doing it really well. They got huge reviews. And basically, if you have a big team of students working on a game, you can get a lot of traction by just putting your game out there. So we're going to talk about how things have changed on Steam. One of the things that's changed is it's really hard to get noticed. But this, to me, seems like, okay, well, maybe if the average game makes $5,000 in their first year, maybe that $5,000 should be you should just forego that and call it marketing money. And some of these free games are like, they have a prologue. So if they do well, they can sell the rest of their game. If it's a student game, what I'm assuming is maybe they can get a publishing deal and finish the game off or make more content or do a sequel.
Or, I mean, one of the bullet points on here is that maybe this is a replacement for the marketing-only Kickstarter. You know, the Kickstarter that people run for like $5,000 or something like that. I mean, maybe you just put a demo up on Steam and see if it gets traction, right? I mean,
yeah, this is really fast. I mean, if anybody has any questions, please interject while we're talking about this. But I'm happy to. Zane?
Sure. Yeah.
Right. So I guess part of the point I'm trying to make is I started on Steam with $1 game. And I think $1 game is still a huge barrier to entry for some people. And if you're not going to make much on that first game, and I think that's pretty much what people expect, then maybe giving it away will get you more exposure, and that second game will do even better. So that's just some food for thought. And this is what you can tell by looking at the charts on Steam.
Yeah, the vast number of people who have Steam only have up to 3 or less than 5 titles. So it does kind of feed into that if they're not going to buy very much, going for free will get you those eyes, because I think it's about 80% of people have less than 5 titles on Steam or something like that.
Yeah, I think I had heard a number that was something like, as an indie developer, you're fighting for like the 10% of Steam that buys a lot of games, basically. So 90% of Steam is there to play Dota or something, you know. So now we're going to shift over to talk about a few case studies. Did you have anything else to add? Okay.
So I'm going to talk about indie retro games that are kind of small scale, because that's the game that I released on Steam. Clash Force was kind of this pixel art, short, 1-hour experience inspired by old games. So this is a really popular genre on Steam, or by popular I mean popular with developers. Like I did a quick look with the indie and the pixel graphics tags, like those two tags combined, there's about 2,000 games, and it seems like there's like 3 releasing a day, so it's really crowded. And this is not, like a lot of people making these games probably aren't setting up their tags or are setting up their tags differently. So I think this is actually a smaller section of that than even there actually are. Another thing notice is like a lot of them are really cheap or on sale. But like I want to manage expectations, because for me at least, like we weren't really expecting to make a ton of money off of our game. And I think it's okay if you consider success to mean just making some money and having some good reviews. Like, I think that is completely fine. I kind of hate thinking of games as a business, and if I didn't, I'd probably cry inside anyway, because it's hard to make money in games, even if you do treat it as a business. So I just wanted to start this by saying, like, I think if you're making a game you care about, maybe it doesn't matter if it makes money. So that said, I'm going to look at a game that did do pretty well in that genre. Blazing Chrome released in July 2019, and this was actually the 3rd game by this developer. He started with Oniken, or I think it's a team, but they started with Oniken, then they made Odalus, and you can see a clear progression as they go. So, like that first, the follower counts, the 2729 is how many followers they had at launch.
Does everybody know what Steam followers are and how to see that? Just go look when you're on a game, click find community groups, and it'll tell you how many people are in the community group. That's the followers.
And followers can be a pretty good predictor of sales.
And
the
wish list.
First, I always get it mixed up.
Most people estimate your sales based on the follower count.
Yeah. So I don't know what to make of this, but I also noticed that they increased the price of each one. Now, what I noticed is maybe I underpriced Clash Force, and I suspect possibly they might be raising the price as their audience grows and they know that they can make more money. As if you release a $4.99 game, no matter how many sales you make, you're still going to make $4.99 scale profits. And you can see like Oniken did pretty well. It had 492 reviews when I looked. That's 5 years after launch. And that is with kind of a long tail. 36 is how many reviews they had during the first month. And you can also kind of tell sales from reviews. So, what's that guy's name called?
Yeah, what is it called? It's the I don't know.
Bruce Slider or something.
Yeah, box lighter method.
Box Slider, yes.
Yeah.
It's between like 30 and 70. You can multiply reviews by.
Usually I use 50. So
Yeah.
if you see, yeah, so if we have 100 reviews, it's like 5,000 sales is the estimate.
Typically
It's
one
an
sale
estimate,
for every 50 to
yeah.
100 sales.
We're gonna show more stuff with it later. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, the Odalus did about the same, a little better. Blazing Chrome just like blew the other two out of the water. Go ahead. Oh,
Was that
that's
it?
the only slide now, apparently.
Oh.
I forgot. So to sum that up, it seems like building on past successes is a really viable strategy. So my point about maybe it's okay to make a small scale game and be okay with small scale sales because that's going to potentially build into your next products. And
Or free.
yes, or free might work too.
Yeah.
Like I also just think Blazing Chrome was some sort of culmination of what he was trying to do. Like you can tell all the games have kind of a similar DNA, but Blazing Chrome is very high production value. It's got this awesome live action trailer. They got a publisher for the first time. They have amazing GIFs and just nailed their theme. Yeah.
All right, cool. So now
Right.
we'll.
All right, I'm going to talk for a second. I need to see the computer because I can't remember anything that I wrote up here. So we're still going through use cases. A game that I thought really stood out to me is a really interesting game. So when we were preparing this panel, we were looking at games that launched very recently. So I tried to look at this month and try to find some interesting stuff that was post that Discovery update that we were talking about. This game, Drums of War, is a really interesting example to me because, first of all, they have some experienced people working on the game. So they have the first thing in their trailer basically says from the lead designer of Guitar Hero Metallica. And it's a VR game where you play drums. And I don't know if you guys know anything about the probably the most popular VR game right now, but it doesn't have a whole lot of competition, I would say. And so you would think this would be a pretty great way to approach VR. Even though, VR is definitely a different market. I don't have a lot of personal experience in it. This guy does, but still, you want to always look at your angle. You want to see, how does this kind of fit into that genre? How does it fit in the platform? It seems like they did a lot of things right here. They were actually an indicated selection in 2018. So they had a little bit of buzz from that on Twitter. They're self-published, but they only had 22 followers, which is a pretty small number to launch with, according to all these other talks and stuff that we're all Googling every day. But I still think the pitch of this game and execution was actually really well done in a lot of ways. The execution, they had notable gameplay. I would say notable because they were selected for the Indiecade E3 booth. That's a huge thing. They have good production values. I think the scope had to have been smart. So I don't know how much money they had to make this game. I don't know how long it took. I know they were definitely working on it for the last year before they launched, but I would have to think it's very minimal animation, minimal assets, because it's the VR POV game, and you're just hitting the drums. So really, just want a nice looking set of drums and some enemies. So the scope has to be pretty good. They licensed music from legit metal bands, which is probably the number one thing they need to do. And but I will say there are a couple. They dropped the ball in a couple places when it comes to marketing. I think the Indiecade thing was a huge thing, but they didn't really post enough about it. They didn't really get enough press buzz because when I searched Drums of War, the first thing that came up was a different game of that name, which is not a good sign. And there were more press articles on that game that's a few years old. So, not that you can't call your game that, but it probably would be better to come up with a more unique name, or definitely get more press out there, because it's going to lead to some branding confusion. It's going to, maybe throw some barriers for people to find your game when you say, oh yeah, the game's called Drums of War. Then they try to look for it and they can't find it, or they find a different game. That's definitely not ideal. As far as the art, I'm the artist on the panel, so I think they did really well here, but I do think they could have capitalized on the metal theme a bit more. Had like another hook there, because if they really push the art side, since it's like a music game, so it's all about like that metal feeling. And again, this is more just me and my preferences, but I do think art and music a lot of times are overlooked as kind of like a secondary hook to your main hook, and I think you can always sharpen that up.
Do you know if this launched on PSVR?
No, I don't think it's launched anywhere else
So
that
it's
I could
just
find.
here,
Yeah. So they just launched October 1st. They didn't have many followers, so they didn't have many reviews. They basically just don't have much action going on their page right now. That it sounds very negative. But that doesn't mean there isn't potential for this game. Other platforms, I do think it's a really interesting concept. The reviews are very positive, the reviews that they have. I only counted 2 here, but then there's other reviews where they were given Steam keys. So take that as you will. But they're all very positive. People were saying the takeaway of the feedback was fun, surprising depth, not a traditional rhythm game. So I think there's a lot of things you could kind of figure out.
Right, and
what
maybe
they could tighten
before
up
the
with.
update, this game would have done a lot better by being on Beat Saber or something.
Right,
Yeah.
and that's honestly probably the biggest takeaway from my point of view. All of us being on Steam right now after that Discovery update, not that it's a rule of thumb that you will not get placement there at all, but if they had placement like then that #1 spot on Beat Saber, and right now the #1 spot on Beat Saber is Thumper, which is a really awesome rhythm game that's in VR, but also not VR exclusive, and it's not really drumming. But it's like, okay, yeah, I could see that fitting, but I think this would have been a shoo-in since it's actually a drumming game before the Discovery update. But now after the Discovery update, you cannot rely on that. You have to get that marketing from the outside. And so yeah, I just thought it was a really interesting example, because even I think Beat Saber launched in May, I believe, either April or May on Steam. So if they had somehow launched sooner before that update had hit, it could have changed. Like there could have been a lot more higher numbers here. So yeah,
Definitely take away that Steam won't do your marketing like they used to.
right.
All right, so I wanted to also talk about another way that I kind of look at games, which is to kind of compare 2 very similar games. These 2 games, Stygian and Overland, maybe you've heard of them. So pre-release, they launched at a very similar time recently. They both had very similar, stats and things beforehand. Stygian did a Kickstarter. Overland did an early access on itch.io and made a lot of money. They were basically the itch.io refinery launch title. Itch basically redid their whole site for Overland. which is pretty cool that they did that. They had a similar follower count on Steam. Overland did, was in the lead there. The games are obviously very different. Stygian is more of a Lovecraftian horror RPG, which sounds pretty cool. Like that's a pretty good pitch, I think. And Overland's pitch was post-apocalyptic road trip simulator. Okay, that's kind of cool too. I think that's interesting. They're very different though. Overland's more of a procedural game. Stygian is a story-driven game, hand-designed. So it's kind of interesting to look at then the launch outcomes. They launched within a week of each other, similar price points, follower counts, again, very, very similar. But you can see Stygian, man, had a lot more peak players, a ton more reviews, about 5x more reviews. So we can estimate the sales were pretty significantly higher, which is kind of weird, right? You wouldn't think that would be the case based on the numbers I showed you to start with. But so I kind of feel like the big thing for Stygian was that setting is really important in a game. It matters maybe as much as art. I think the Overland art style looks more attractive than what Stygian did, but that setting, that they also did a launch discount that I think helps. Again, playing into the setting. There's not a lot of Lovecraft games out there, I mean, that's something that was definitely a big hook for them. I think the other thing I've noticed, I made a game that's actually very similar to Overland, and it performed very similarly to Overland as well. But Steam users really love story-driven. Like, that's really popular there. So you can look at, like, the Divinity games, 1 and 2, Pillars of Eternity, 1 and 2, both did very well on Steam. There's a lot of other examples as well. The other thing with Overland, though, that's different is that, they obviously did their early access on itch.io, so they had a lot of people that had already bought the game there and weren't going to be able to leave Steam reviews. Obviously, Overland was an Apple Arcade launch title. They also launched on all the consoles at the exact same time. And Stygian was basically only on Steam. So just because a game doesn't achieve the same review numbers and sales doesn't mean that it wasn't a success sometimes. So that's the other thing you have to think about is, by spreading themselves out a little bit more, they possibly eroded their Steam numbers a little bit, but I'm sure they did very well. So, but this is an interesting exercise to go and do, and you can pull all these numbers. So like if I go back, like all these numbers are pretty publicly available. Peak players and stuff are on. If you've ever looked at SteamDB. It's a website that catalogs a lot of stuff from Steam. Reviews are out there, obviously, and the follower counts. There's a couple of tools out there to go and estimate stuff like that. So I think that's pretty much it for our slides. We have, some Q&A if you guys want to ask us some questions or anything. If not, I have some questions I could ask. Anybody have a question? Can we get a volunteer to bring a...
Yeah, I'm just wondering, you kind of dabbled on your own experiences with Steam. I just want to know what you guys have specifically been doing to try to get more exposure with this new algorithm change for your own games.
Okay.
I can repeat it. It's he just wanted to know what we're doing to kind of counter the algorithm change for our own games. You want to answer that first?
Yeah, for us mainly, our marketing efforts are largely focused on just getting Twitch streamers to play the game, as well as YouTubers. That seems to have gotten us the best response so far. It's
Also picking your moments with press. I mean, when you're a small team, you probably are not going to be emailing people for press every day. But also, the general rule with press is you only have 4 shots or 5 shots. So save it for that, a launch of early access, full release, console launch, some big announcement in there. But if you if you just push it, if you do it too early, like say, oh, we just released it, we have an announcement, and you're not even really established studio, but you're announcing a game, and then you get picked up by some, that's great. Or if you have a new trailer that's going to announce your release, or you're launching an early access, or you're launching the full release, you could spread those out, or you could just stack them all up into one big press. We have a new trailer, a new release. I think a lot of times when you stack the deck that way, being a small studio, that'll get you some press. the more stuff you can kind of give them that makes you more enticing to them. So I think real stacked, focused press shots, but then just constantly looking at streamers and influencers. Definitely make sure you
So I got a
are
follow-up
reaching out to
question for you.
influencers and streamers that would play your game.
Yeah. So how do you identify people who might play your game?
I spend a lot of time watching people who might enjoy my game.
Get down and watch them.
Making a lot of spreadsheets and saying maybe, yes, no, highlight. Oh, this guy, huge get.
So what, do you just randomly search Twitch for stuff? I mean, what do you? Where are you getting the? How are
right.
you identifying the
There's
people
a
to
few
even watch?
different approaches. So one of the things I've done is Google other people who have similar games to me. So like a lot of times the easiest way to get people that probably have a high percentage of playing your game is you just look at the most similar game you could think of to your game that's pretty recent, right? So I mean, for our game specifically, I've been using Undermine, I've been using Dead Cells, Noita just came out. A lot of those I kind of use as like the base. Then beyond that, on Twitch, always looking at tags. There's always roguelike. There's always indie. Obviously, indie gets pretty diluted. But also, it's interesting to see the people that you might find with those tags. Also, for our game, it's a healing game that kind of feels like a little World of Warcraft in some ways. Like you're healing your crew as you're dungeon raiding. So I've literally been following World of Warcraft streamers, and when I get one of those big World of Warcraft streamers, it's going to change everything.
That's gross.
All right, that's cool. Yeah, you.
Have you tried any key services like Move It or
Have we tried any key services like Woovit or
Yeah.
Keymail or?
Well, I mean, I know you have too.
I mean, I've used Keymailer before. I thought it was kind of. You basically need to use the paid version of it in order to get anything. I think mostly what's happening on the free is people trying to scam keys.
It's not entirely that though. I did have some success on Clash Force with Keymailer.
I don't know, but
Happy
when
I
you
did.
have
It is a bit of a
200
shotgun
requests,
approach.
it's too hard to try to figure out who is.
Well, they do tell you like this person has high reputation and stuff. Like I focused on them and I was happy with the coverage they gave us.
I can speak directly to Woovit because I use that for Sinkr too. And I just used their pay 1 month and see how it goes. And they let me search, through the streamers. And it was worth my time and effort to do that. Especially you can do it free. You don't even have to spend the $60 for 1 month. But, just that one streamer could make a huge difference. And if all you're going to do, you could hit Keymailer and move it on the free side and just make sure you're available. You don't have to actually give keys away if you don't think the people are upright.
Yeah, I could second the importance of that one big streamer. Our game, there's one streamer who put it on YouTube. I think his name is Splattercat, which is responsible for 15% of our sales.
But that doesn't take the place of direct emails. I mean, a direct email to a streamer or to the admin of the streamer in a personal email. You've watched something they've done. You explain what you're doing and why you think you're a good fit. That's much more effective than just putting keys out on Keymailer.
Right. So I see like those mailing services as like just that ground floor, a few views here and there, try to get just some rumblings, try to get in the hands of some people. But I don't want to say it's low quality. I don't know how to say it, but like compared to like the Splattercat, which you mentioned, the reason we got him was not through one of the services. It was me sending an email with a GIF that was very calculated and very much like, you played this game. You also talked about how you used to heal in an MMO. Anything that if you could research them for a few weeks, call them up to their support, the more effort you put into that relationship, you're not expendable. You don't.
Is probably not going to work that well. Sinkr 1 versus Sinkr 2. Did you build on?
I did. So I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. Sinkr's a minimalist puzzle game, and I started out at the $1 range because I like the free thing I was talking about before. I wanted to make sure people actually saw my game and try to build some brand. You know, I have a long-term plan. Um, the games are now $3, so I've been inching the price up, and that's working well for me. But Sinkr 2, the question Mike had is, yeah, when I released Sinkr 2 in May at the $3 point, and it brought up sales of Sinkr 1, and I sold, you know, probably 2,000 copies in the first week, and that was almost 5 times the first game. So, and I think Joe was in here before. He's like the sequel king. I think the more your name, brand, game is out there, the more likely your next release is going to be even better. So yeah, there was some nice talk on this stuff for releasing number 2.
Any strategies that you could share for people releasing a second game?
I'm in a completely different category as far as price range and marketing than the rest of the guys in the panel, because my games are low price, you know, minimalist. Game, because it doesn't matter to me. Steam is giving me the traffic, and that's all changed, you know. So it's quite a bit different. But you know, a couple of years ago, you could just put a game out there and get traffic. You could still do that. So as far as if your game is in the $10 to $20 range, it's a completely different ballgame because you've got a lot more effort involved into it. And you need to be very careful on marketing. Basically, my game was for marketing, you know, get it on Steam and build an audience, and that's working for me. So gradually over time, you know, I'm building more followers, and I expect the third game should do as well or better in the next last game.
So Jason, you just released Looking for Healz in early access. Talk us through how that went. And what's your strategy for the next step?
Yeah, early access was, I think most everyone in town has done full releases, so early access was a bit new, but I think it fit my game, and it was definitely, yeah, it was a learning process. Mainly, I took a bit of a more cavalier approach, and I released it a little earlier than most developers might, but I think that's the actual thing that it did for me was it gave you that, you know, now there's 300 people that are convincing you to keep working on that game, and not only that, but they're giving you bug reports, and they're giving you feedback, and there's all sorts of things to just focus on and think about while you are in development. And so specifically, I think it was specific to the genre we went with. We went with a roguelike, which is very good for, you know, they can always come back and play a new run for 5 minutes and leave it and come back a month later. It was good for that. Unlike maybe a visual novel game or something, probably wouldn't work so well with early access. So yeah, and our plans for that have been just to aim towards a deadline, which is end of the month currently. And yeah, it's been it's been a good experience so far. So mainly it just gives your pre-development a lot more a boost because you have people actually play testing your game for you.
We had a question here in the front.
I have another one. You've mentioned several times with the case study and the Sinkr games how it's good to build a following off the backs of smaller games onto bigger releases, which we gain a group. We're actually students with Aurora, and I'm wondering if you could apply a similar strategy like that to games that have disparate themes. So how would we build like a brand around the team instead of the individual games? Because if we have within our group a RPG and then we want to release later a free strategy game, how would we synergize those two games so we maintain a following through them?
With the exception with bundles, perhaps, but it's really very game driven.
So there was a GDC talk last year about the Sock Pop, is that right? Sock Pop Collective. Go look that up. I think that might be an interesting talk that kind of goes through some similar things, that they're a group who made a bunch of games. They tried to come out with a game every month, and they're different theme and gameplay mechanics and things like that. And it was really interesting. And they're primarily supported through Patreon, so that might be something to check out.
And I think, you know, definitely make sure to brand your games as the group. So I don't know if you need to use a studio page to do that or a curator group, I don't know, there's probably a lot of different ways to approach it, but definitely make sure on each page it has like that same icon or that same thing that kind of ties you guys together. So that way you know, people will hopefully think about it, or like you were saying with bundles, I think that way you can at least share.
Yeah, I mean,
click
and
to this
maybe-
game if you like this game.
Maybe you could have the publisher be the group and the developers listed separately.
Yeah, there's ways to do it to where you can naturally put some links on there to tie yourself together.
So we had another question over here.
So it seemed like a lot of the data backs up that a lot of the cheaper games or free games are doing well on Steam. A lot of marketing kind of advice has been in the opposite direction. Like you should bring your price up because you want to portray your game as something of quality that's worth that money. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, I
We
mean,
probably all have different opinions.
I'll give you my opinion first. Definitely price is an indicator of quality to some customers. So you really have to consider whether you're willing to do that to your game. So, but if you don't get anybody to look at your game, what's the point, right? So you have to make the trade-off. It's going to be different for every game, for every studio. You have to really consider your personal situation. But, you know, I'm a strong believer in, if I thought that I could have been successful with Sinkr by giving it away, I would have just done that originally rather than charging $1 for it, because that was more important to me, to start getting people aware that I can make puzzle games, so come play my games. So I just was afraid, like you mentioned, that maybe that if people would be suspicious of free, and you have to consider that.
I think people are also suspicious of too cheap. What I've read is that there's sort of price tiers, like there's like free $4.99, $9.99, $14.99, and we released Clash Force at $4.99, and at launch actually we got a lot of blowback, like game was too short, not actually worth $4.99, but we responded to that by adding more content. I think the game was incomplete at launch, and we should have launched with more content. But the thing with $4.99 is that's sort of the bargain bin tier, right? So, like, people look at your game a certain way. I actually think some people won't buy it, and I think probably some people filter out these cheaper tier games. I don't know that we could have sold it at $9.99, but there's a psychological perception of your game's quality from the price.
Yeah, I would say if you're trying to sell a higher price game, that you need to look at the other games in that price tier and make sure that you're, like, actually play the games and make sure that you're meeting the quality that people are going to expect from that game. Because, like, I mean, for $14.99, I can buy Hollow Knight, and that is like one of the most polished games that I've in many years. And so, and Stardew Valley also is $14.99 on Steam. So, I mean, you have to consider stuff like that when you're making pricing decisions. I think it's very difficult, and some games are able to price higher. I think like niche genre games maybe can price a little higher, especially story-driven stuff. I think if it's not story-driven, if it's procedural, you got to price a little bit lower. So,
Yeah, we priced it $14.99, and we did get some comments, but I think the sales data did support that was probably about the price point it needed to be at, but definitely not any higher. In terms of talking about with the new way Steam does things, it's really just about, from what we can tell, just making sure you put something into marketing to make sure that you have a nice marketing momentum, and then get before you go on Steam, so that price point can make you money.
And then, I guess since we're all going to chime in, even though we worked on the same thing. So I just wanted to clarify about the free thing. Well, yeah, we don't have to talk about that. I was gonna clarify about that free takeaway. For me, the free takeaway is, oh, cool. Let's work on a really specific thing for like a month. Put it out there and just generate some buzz around the studio or around the game. Maybe it's specific to the game, maybe it's not. But just it's more like, it doesn't necessarily have to be this game I've worked on for years, put it out there for free now, and then hope for the best. Because, you know, what's your next project look like? Does it make more sense to just, you know, hold that back, polish it, and then work on something for a couple months, make it really cool and hope that generates some buzz for this. So I kind of see it as more short, small scope stuff that would be free.
So they're almost like marketing projects.
Yeah.
But I'm not sure that Steam is actually the place to do that, because if you look at the ones that are free, they're highly polished, super polished.
Right.
Itch and other platforms, Patreon, or might be a better place to do your tryout projects.
Right. And yeah, again, to clarify, like, yeah, I think you're totally right. I think a lot of people are putting stuff on Steam that should probably not be on Steam. Should be on Itch. Should be on Gamejolt first. You should definitely not fool yourself with your polish, because there's definitely a high bar there set by everyone else that you just always need to be aware of. So, but yeah.
So we had another question over here.
Yes, I was wondering your thoughts on releases for instead of having part 1, part 2, and part 3, maybe DLC along that line where you have expansions to your game.
So DLC attach rate's usually like 10%. So that means if you sold 1,000 copies, you put out a DLC, it's probably gonna sell 100 copies.
Right, but look at the list. Go back when you get home and look at the Steam list. One of those games is
Well, I'm not saying that's bad. I'm just saying that's a fact.
right,
Yeah.
but the prologue can work, right? And then the next game, the next episode, it's better to sell episode 1 really well than to have neither one.
Right. So if you do the first episode free and then sell the second one, maybe that is a viable strategy.
I also think it's worth mentioning that Steam lets you do additional visibility rounds every time you do an update. I think there's some benefit in doing free updates. And you might get more people than you would get money from the DLC. I don't know.
But that's kind of misleading. The visibility update
Yeah.
means only the people that already own your game or have wish lists that will see it. It's not like a magic
So it's a good
bullet.
way to reach your wish list people, but
We have a lot of unconverted wish lists, so I
Yeah,
think
yeah.
about that a lot.
And you see this in a lot of prominent games. When it comes to mind is Enter the Gungeon, which is just continually added large content packs to the same game, and they basically just use that as their marketing. Like, if you haven't bought it yet, you got even more stuff now. Yeah.
Yeah, they changed their icon and their the art looked different. I remember that. It was effective.
Yeah. Any other questions? We have one over there.
Hey, so in terms of you guys were talking about marketing, and you were saying that you guys, basically look for a Twitch streamer with similar interests of your games and stuff like that. And I don't know if you guys have data on it, but how effective do you guys think like targeted advertising is, like for certain, I don't know, subreddits on Reddit or Facebook or things like that? If that plays as big of a part or less of a part, or just about as equal as Twitch streamers? I just didn't know.
So, I mean, that's an interesting question. So you're wanting to quantify advertising versus streamer stuff, right? So, I mean, like what I was mostly, what, you want to clarify? Yeah.
So like I did. So basically, my question was like, if you have any data on dollar for dollar, or
So first of all, it's really difficult to quantify what's coming from Twitch streamers sometimes. I mean, there are some ways to do it. What I saw at launch was that I had a huge boost in Google traffic, and that was what I kind of attributed to streaming. As far as like the ads go, I've definitely done Facebook ads. I have not tried Reddit ads, although I do know some people have had some success with them. Facebook ads can work. I mean, I had some mixed success with those at various times, but at the time, the problem was that whatever traffic I could drive with Facebook paled in comparison to what Steam was giving me from an organic point of view. So like, I mean, it would cost me, hundreds of dollars a day to even get close to what Steam was giving me for free. Now this was pre-discovery update, and so I don't know that that's true anymore. And we're probably going to do some more experimenting with Facebook on the next launch for Polyroll. I mean, I've definitely heard people say this isn't really going to answer your question, but I've heard people say that you should basically plow all the money you make in your first couple of days on Steam back into ads to try to continually, to be like an echo chamber and just keep getting more and more people to look at the page and sell more and more copies. And hopefully at some point that pushes you over the top in terms of getting in another tier on Steam that they start featuring you, or you're on the new and trending, something like that.
Right. Yeah, I think what Mike was saying is that's especially important in that first week. But I'm not so sure after the first week that it's worth for a premium game to try to pay for advertising. I've given it a lot of thought, and I have a lot of experience on the mobile side of that too. And for a premium game, it just doesn't pay. If you have a free-to-play game and you're trying to engage people to keep coming back and playing and buying, then advertising makes a whole lot more sense to me.
Well, I'll just have one more quick point to that. With like Facebook ads, for instance, it's very easy to know exactly what happens, like in terms of how many clicks and things like that. Now, you can't put a Facebook pixel on your Steam page, which is kind of unfortunate, so you don't know every detail about what happens. Like, you don't know if they actually bought once they get there or wishlisted, but you at least know if they clicked. Now, from streamers, I know how many people viewed it, potentially. I mean, Twitch gives you some details on that, like you can get some reports out of Twitch on viewership, but you have no idea like what that actually turns into. My game also was played by Splattercat. We had a boost. We had a couple spikes, and they're all from YouTube. I mean, so that stuff you can kind of quantify a little better, but it's very difficult to compare.
I was curious, what made you decide initially for the release of your titles to go with Steam versus mobile or one of the indie marketplaces on console?
Oh, sure. Well, mainly the market share of Steam is just so high that if you're on PC, it just makes the most business sense to go with it. Mobile has certain genre limitations, depending on what kind of game you're making. It might not work on mobile very much. And in terms of console, our idea was to use the eyeballs and sales from Steam to kind of use that as a bit of a marketing segue into our console release. So that's kind of where we came from.
So also from a development standpoint, Steam has the lowest barrier to entry. If you're comparing to mobile and consoles, I mean, mobile, the problem could be that your game's going to be very difficult to optimize to run on mobile, or as Jason mentioned, the controls may not, be.
But yeah, if you're specifically making a mobile game, I think launching on Steam first is actually a viable strategy, because it's really, especially for premium. If you have a premium game and you want to get it on mobile, it's really impossible to get noticed. So I tried that first, didn't work. So then I went to Steam, and Steam gave me the tools to get a little bit of notice, and then all the normal things you do like showcasing and networking and stuff. And then went back to mobile, and I've had success doing that. So Steam is a good place to go if you're, first for premium mobile developers, I think. Especially with the communities on Steam, you can tune up and find all the problems. They'll let you know. Steam will let you know everything that's wrong with your game. You can clean it up and then launch it on mobile later, which is what I've done for the last couple of releases.
There's also some risk going in the other direction. I got a lot of my Zap Blastum game was originally a mobile-first game that I was just going to make a PC version of, but I got a lot of feedback that on Steam people will eat you alive if they detect mobile port. So I kind of refocused on PC and console, with mobile being like something I'll do after. I don't know. My take is it's kind of hard to succeed on mobile without a publisher, because all the games at the top of the list are backed with tons of advertising.
Where does the 90% market share for Steam come from? Is that what you're asking? I think we're talking about the premium PC market, like people that are purchasing games. We're not ignoring anything. That's what somebody else has said what that number is. So I don't.
From the data we have.
We'll follow up with you after the talk. Any other questions?
My question was, if you had any like experience, like with giveaways, like giving away a copy of a game on like Twitter or something, and how that translates to sales maybe?
Yeah, I did that some. We ran, my PR company ran a contest on Destructoid to give away some copies, and I gave away a bunch on Twitter, and I would go into Twitch streams where they were streaming and drop keys in there. I don't know that it made any difference though. It was fun.
I think at the level that we're at, it's more valuable if you're going to give away keys to just make sure they're streamers and not just, because basically this key could go to someone who you have a pretty high chance will stream it or someone who like probably won't stream it. So those are kind of like the way I look at it, because the giveaway is not going to all of a sudden incite a bunch of people to buy the game.
It's important to bring up also that free keys don't count towards your like positive review score. Like they will not help you get mostly positive. So it's
And
you won't
they'll
be able to
also,
buy it.
I have seen some negative correlations between more free keys going out and the free key sites that exist out there. Yeah, we see some traffic coming from them, and then our wish list going to the negative that day. So.
Right. And I think it's okay also to seed keys, though, so it does actually work. If you want to give away hundreds of keys to these key giveaway sites, you actually get some return from that. Just looking at the traffic on your Steam page, Steam will let you see what happens. So it's a viable strategy.
Like what sites you mean?
Ask me later. It's
Another post talk.
No, but
follow-up.
the Steam curators, there's a curator system on Steam where they'll ask you for a key so they can put it on their curator page. And that usually works. And several of the sites actually give those keys away, sort of like G2A, but to get more viewership on their personal websites. And I used to think, oh no, that's kind of slimy. But no, it actually works. That you get... ask me later and I'll come up with the names of them, but there are 2 or 3 that I know of that do give away keys to get more viewership on their websites, and it helps a little bit. But I also want to go back to casual portals, that we had a question about that, and we haven't addressed that at all, but if you have a game that's appropriate for casual portals, go for it. I mean, Big Fish, they're doing really well still. I mean, it's a decreasing market.
It's on my list.
Oh, was it? Sorry.
We'll find it. There, see? Casual portals. In G2A. What do you think, Joe? Casual portals, Joe says. Joe's made a lot of money on the casual portals. I can't say anything bad about him. I don't think my game was going to work there, but it might. Ooh. Yeah, we had a question in the back. I can repeat it, yeah.
In terms of like early access, or? I don't think it necessarily affects the brand. It's really a matter of most customers, you really can't give them the expectation that they're going to be able to dissect what's wrong and what's right with your not finished game. So it's mainly just about knowing what you want to deal with when you release a game that's unfinished. And I don't think it necessarily has too much of a negative impact on your brand.
Yeah, and I think especially if you fix whatever's wrong with it, that
Right.
can help.
Like
Poly-
over the course of early access, we've been doing weekly updates. So we don't really have a fear of that. I think it's about how you're updating it and kind of proving consistency.
Yeah, if they know it's an early access or a beta, you have the chance to build that trust between you and the customer that you're going to keep working with them and working on stuff broken in your game.
I wanted to say with Polyroll, we released a very, very early version of the first world with the Sonic fan game collection. And that was where like a big part of our Steam traffic came from in the beginning. I think like a lot of our wish lists actually came from that. So that kicked us off and got us in the algorithm in the first place, I guess.
Yeah, getting your work out there is the right thing to do, no matter what way. All right, well, I think that's all the time we have. So thanks everybody who came. Thanks to the
lot.
panelists.